I want you to picture two different scenarios for a second. In scenario A, the United States government decides it really doesn't like the leader of a foreign country. Maybe he's too independent, maybe he's threatening a corporate interest. Within weeks, agents are on the ground, the media narrative shifts, riots seemingly pop up out of nowhere, a coup is staged, the leader is out, and a new guy is in. It's brutal, sure, but it is terrifyingly efficient.
That runs like a Swiss watch.
Exactly. Now, scenario B, that same government tries to fix the potholes on your commute. Or, let's get serious, they try to stop a lethal drug like fentanyl from killing 70,000 Americans a year. And suddenly
the machine just grinds to a halt.
it breaks. It's all shrug shoulders, bureaucratic confusion, and sorry, it's just too complicated.
And that is the ultimate contradiction of American life, isn't it? We have a state apparatus that's capable of global surveillance regime change, yet it seems completely powerless to solve basic problems that actually hurt its own citizens.
And that is the mystery we are looking at today. We are doing a deep dive into an article by Ryan Collison titled Dulles, the CIA, and the Fentanyl Problem. And I have to say, this piece, it sort of rewired my brain. It completely reframes how you look at the news.
It's a heavy hitter. Collison argues that we're suffering from what philosophers would call a category error. We look at the fentanyl crisis or, crumbling infrastructure, and we say, man, the government is so incompetent.
Right. The system is broken. We say that all the time.
But Collison says, no, the machine isn't broken. It is working exactly according to its design specifications. It's just that the specs aren't help the public. The specs are project power and protect profit.
So competence isn't missing, it's just allocated.
Precisely. It's what we're calling the priority problem. When the objective aligns with powerful interests, the government is hyper-competent. When it's just about saving regular lives,
Yeah.
that's when the incompetence kicks in.
That is a cynical, but yeah, a very compelling hook. And to prove this, the source takes us on a bit of a history trip. We're going back to what he calls the golden age of the CIA under Allen Dulles.
We're talking 1953 to 1961. This is really where the modern deep state, if you want to call it that, or just the national security state, was architected.
And I think for a lot of us, we have this movie version of the 50s CIA. Men in trench coats, passing notes on park benches in Berlin. But the source paints a picture of something much more aggressive.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It wasn't passive intelligence gathering. It was active world building. Collison points to two specific operations to demonstrate this competence: Iran in 1953 and Guatemala in 1954.
Let's unpack Iran first. Operation TPH-X. This is the classic example of we want X, so we make X happen. But walk us through the why.
The context is it's vital here. Iran had a democratically elected prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh. He was actually quite popular at home. He was a nationalist.
But he made one fatal mistake in the eyes of the West. Let me guess. It involves oil.
It always involves oil. He nationalized the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, which is what we now know as BP. He thought, Iranian oil should probably benefit Iranians.
A radical idea.
The British obviously panicked. They came to the U.S., and Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA, saw an opportunity.
And this is where that efficiency comes in. Because they didn't invade, that's messy, that's expensive. No, they dismantled the country from the inside.
It was a masterpiece of engineering chaos.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the CIA didn't just show up and shoot people. They bribed Iranian politicians to turn on Mossadegh. They paid street thugs and strongmen to stage riots. They even planted stories in the press to paint him as a communist sympathizer or, an enemy of Islam.
They basically manufactured a reality.
They did. They created so much instability that when the military stepped in to restore order, it looked like a necessary move to save the country. They ousted Mossadegh, installed the Shah, who was a brutal dictator but very friendly to Western oil companies, and helped set up a secret police force, AVAC, to keep him there.
And from the CIA's perspective, even though this eventually led to the Iranian Revolution in '79 for 25 years, this was a massive win.
Mission accomplished, the oil flowed, the West was happy, the competence was absolute.
Okay, so that's oil. Now look at Guatemala the very next year, 1954, Operation PBSC-CES. Different country, same playbook. But instead of oil...
Bananas.
Bananas.
Specifically, the United Fruit Company. They essentially own the Guatemalan economy. But a new president, Jaco Arbenz, wanted to institute land reform. He wanted to give uncultivated land back to farmers.
And United Fruit cried foul, called their friends in Washington, and Dulles went to work.
And again, the source highlights the creativity of the violence. They didn't send in the Marines.
No.
No. They trained a proxy army of mercenaries in neighboring Honduras. They flew planes over Guatemala City to bomb it and create panic. But here's the kicker. They jammed radio stations to spread misinformation that a massive invasion was happening. They made the government believe they were outnumbered 10-1.
It was a complete psychological operation.
A completely successful one. Arbenz resigned. A military dictatorship took over. And the result? A 40-year civil war. 200,000 people dead. The UN later classified acts during this period as genocide.
But United Fruit got their land back.
As Collison writes in the article, the bananas flowed north uninterrupted. That is the definition of the competence we are talking about here. It was immoral. It was destructive. But it achieved the specific goal of a concentrated corporate interest. Perfectly.
So the argument is, when the government wants to save a fruit company's bottom line, it can move mountains, it can topple governments, it can coordinate complex logistics across borders.
Right. So don't tell me they can't figure out how to scan shipping containers for fentanyl. The contrast is the whole point.
Well, before we get to the modern day, there's one more example from the Dulles era that the source brings up, and this one.
This one is darker because it wasn't happening in a foreign country, it was happening here.
I feel like M culture has become this pop culture trope, you know, it's in Stranger Things or on conspiracy forums, but when you read the actual details in the source, it's just horrifying that this was a taxpayer-funded program.
It really is. Authorized by Dulles in 1953. The goal was mind control. They wanted to see if they could program people, create Manchurian candidates, or extract information perfectly during interrogations.
But the scale of it is what shocked me. It wasn't a few mad scientists in some bunker in Virginia.
No, and this is the competence point again. It involved 80 institutions. 80. We are talking about prestigious universities like Harvard and Stanford, hospitals, prisons, pharmaceutical companies.
We don't see of Ivy League universities running CIA torture experiments.
Unwittingly, in some cases, wittingly in others, through front organizations. But the scale is what matters. For 20 years, the government funded experiments using LSD, electroshock, sensory deprivation, hypnosis on American citizens who often had no idea what was happening to them.
The source mentions Frank Olson. That story is tragic, doesn't even begin to cover it.
It's devastating. Olson was an Army scientist, a biological warfare expert. At a retreat, the CIA slipped LSD into his drink just to see what would happen. He had a massive breakdown, developed severe psychosis. 9 days later, he fell, or, as the source suggests, was likely pushed out of a hotel window in New York.
And the government just covered it up.
For decades. They called it a suicide. It wasn't until the 70s that the truth started to leak out. And even then, look at the efficiency of the cleanup. In 1973, CIA Director Richard Helms ordered all the M-Culture files destroyed.
And they mostly were.
Right. We only know what we know because a few boxes were misfiled and found years later. But think about the bureaucratic capability required to run a secret illegal program across 80 institutions for 2 decades and keep it mostly quiet.
It implies a level of control and coordination that is it's staggering. If they can keep that secret for 20 years, they can probably fix a bridge.
Exactly. So we've established the government possesses this high-level competence. They can do hard things. They can do complex things.
Which brings us to the quote-unquote failure of Afghanistan. This is where the source really flips the script. Because if you look at the last 20 years, the narrative is the U.S. government is incompetent. We spent 20 years and trillions of dollars, and the Taliban took it back in a weekend.
By standard definitions, nation building, defeating the enemy, establishing democracy, it was a catastrophe.
But Collison says we are using the wrong definition of success.
Right. He says you have to follow the money. If the mission was to win the war, yeah, they failed. But if the mission was to transfer public wealth to private industry, it was a miracle.
Let's look at the numbers. $2.3 trillion spent. That number is so big it doesn't even register in a human brain.
It's astronomical.
And where did it go? $800 billion straight to the Department of Defense. But then you have the contractors. The source mentions companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Boeing, and private security firms like DynCorp.
Collison calls this the profit of failure. Just think about the incentives. If you are a defense contractor, a quick, decisive victory is actually bad for business.
Because the contracts stop. If the war is over, you stop selling missiles.
Exactly. A 20-year quagmire. That is 20 years of guaranteed government-backed revenue. Every bomb dropped is a billable item. Every flight is an invoice. Every soldier fed is a contract.
And the private security aspect is even more cynical. The source points out that for companies like DynCorp, instability was the product.
Think about it. If Afghanistan is safe, if the local police are competent and the streets are quiet, You don't need to pay a private American firm billions of dollars for bodyguards and base security. The chaos justifies the contract.
So the incentive structure is completely perverse. The worse things got, the more money they made.
It's totally inverted. The source argues that for the concentrated interests, the shareholders of these firms, the lobbyists, the consultants, Afghanistan, was not a failure. It was a roaring financial success. It transferred public tax money into private corporate pockets with incredible efficiency.
It's a wealth transfer mechanism masquerading as a war.
That's the harsh reality the source presents. The government acted as a power allocator. It moved resources to the people it's actually designed to serve. And those people aren't you and me.
So let's just recap before we get to the main event, the fentanyl crisis. We have a government that can overthrow nations to help oil companies, it can run massive secret experiments for the intelligence community, and it can sustain a 20-year war to feed the defense industry.
Correct. The capability is there. The coordination is there.
So why can't it stop fentanyl?
This is the question of our time. We're losing 70,000 Americans a year. It's the leading cause of death for adults 18 to 45.
And logically, this should be easier than invading a country or hiding a mind control program. I mean, the drugs are physical objects. They come from China and Mexico. They come through ports and the mail. It's a logistics problem.
It is. But it remains unsolved. And Collison gives us three main reasons why, based on this whole framework of allocated competence.
Okay, let's break them down. Reason one is what economists call public choice theory. Diffuse versus concentrated interests. This sounds academic, but it explains so much about American politics.
It really does. It asks, who are the victims? Who is actually suffering from the fentanyl crisis?
The source describes them as largely working class, often rural, places like the Rust Belt, Appalachia, people who've been left behind by the economy already.
Right. Now, in political terms, these victims are diffuse. They're unorganized, they're scattered, they don't have a trade association. There is no National Association of Opioid Victims with $1 billion lobbying budget on K Street.
Unlike, say, the banking sector.
Exactly. Compared to 2008.
Yeah.
When Wall Street collapsed, that was a concentrated interest. A small group of very powerful people were in trouble. They got on the phone, they called the Treasury, and the government moved heaven and earth to bail them out within days.
But the fentanyl victims, they're just statistics to the system.
They represent diffuse suffering. The source puts it brutally. The system responds to organized pressure, not general human need. Since these victims can't apply that organized financial pressure, they can't threaten to crash the economy or withhold millions in campaign donations, the system ignores them.
That leads directly into the second reason, the lack of profit in the solution.
Follow the money. How do you solve an addiction crisis? It's not with missiles. You need treatment centers. You need methadone clinics. You need social workers. You need long-term economic revitalization for these hollowed-out towns so people have a reason to live.
And none of that makes a billionaire richer.
There's no contractor lobby for rehab. Raytheon doesn't make money building community centers. The source notes that war generates contracts. Reconstruction generates consulting fees. Saving an addict's life. That generates nothing that the elite want.
It's almost like the problem is invisible to the system because there's no transaction attached to it.
If there's no ROI, no return on investment for the ruling class, the competence is simply not allocated. It's left to charities and local governments who have no resources.
Which brings us to the third reason, and honestly, this is the one that makes you want to throw your headphones across the room. Institutional complicity.
This is the idea that the government isn't just ignoring the problem, they helped create it.
The source is pretty clear here. This epidemic didn't just fall from the sky like a natural disaster.
No. The opioid crisis was manufactured. The FDA approved OxyContin with a label that claimed it was less addictive, a lie. The DEA watched as millions of pills were shipped to tiny towns in West Virginia and did basically nothing.
We've seen the emails from the lawsuits. They knew. The distributors knew. The regulators knew.
The medical establishment, largely funded by pharma, pushed this idea that pain was the fifth vital sign and had to be treated aggressively with opioids.
So if the government were to truly solve the fentanyl crisis now, what would that even look like?
It would require a full-throated admission of guilt. They would have to admit that the FDA is captured by the industry it regulates. They'd have to admit the CDC failed to spot the trend. They would have to admit the DEA failed.
And institutions hate admitting they are wrong.
They refuse to indict themselves. They might fine a specific company like Purdue Pharma, but they will never admit that the system is rotten. The revolving door where regulators leave the FDA and go work for Pfizer the next day, That's the core of the problem.
So solving fentanyl isn't just unprofitable, it's politically dangerous for the people in charge.
Exactly. It exposes the corruption. So instead, you get thoughts and prayers. You get small, meaningless task forces. You get the appearance of action without the reality of it.
It's a sobering realization. We grow up with this Civics 101 idea, right? The government creates laws to protect the people.
And Collison is telling us that is a fairy tale. The government is a tool. When that tool is wielded by United Fruit or Lockheed Martin, it is sharp and effective. When you need it to protect your neighborhood from a drug epidemic, it's blunt and useless.
Because you aren't the customer, you're just the population.
Ouch. But yeah, that's the takeaway.
So what do we do with this? Because I don't want to leave people feeling just purely cynical, but it feels like the message is just you're on your own.
I think the message is clarity. It's about not being naive. Stop expecting the cat to bark. Stop expecting a power structure to act like a charity.
It's about managing expectations.
It is. If you understand why the potholes aren't fixed, you stop waiting for the government to fix them, and maybe you organize your community to do it. If you understand the FDA isn't going to save you from bad food or bad drugs because they serve the industry, you become more vigilant about what you consume.
Competence is allocated by interest, not need. If you want protection, you either need to be profitable to someone powerful, or you need to get organized enough to force the issue.
Yeah, exactly. Diffuse interests get ignored. Organized interests get served. That is the rule of the game.
It really challenges the trust we place in these big acronym agencies, the CIA, the FDA, the CDC. We think of them as separate things.
But the source argues they are all part of the same ecosystem. They aren't good or bad. They are incentive-driven machines. And right now, the incentives are not aligned with public health.
I want to leave the listener with a thought to chew on, something that stems from this whole discussion about mission statement.
The difference between what they say and what they do.
Right. Every agency has a mission statement on their website. We are here to serve the public. We are here to keep you safe. But based on what we've learned today, those are just marketing slogans.
The real mission is found in the budget.
Exactly. So here is the question. Take a look at the institutions you trust most right now. Maybe it's your bank, your university, your local city council. Don't look at their website. Look at who they pay. Look at who gets the contracts. Look at who gets the bailouts.
Follow the money.
If you follow the money, what is their actual mission? And does it include you?
That's a question that might keep you up at night.
That's all for this deep dive. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.